Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Frankenfield. I'd like to introduce myself to you. I'm a former active duty Marine, political science major, and I'm passionate about educating people on the foundations of good government. I want to see us as the electorate, as the citizens of the United States of America, be well informed enough to make wise decisions on public policy. So whether you're on the left side of the political spectrum or the right, I welcome you both. I welcome you here in the center of the continuum for balanced conversation. This is Center Lane Conversations. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Center Lane Conversations. I am your host, Jeff Frankenfield. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch us. If you got a chance to watch last weekend, which was episode 1 over Memorial Day weekend, we talked about the differences between state constitutions and the federal constitution and how our rights may differ depending upon the state that we live in. So if you haven't got a chance to watch that and you enjoy this one, please go back, take a look, and I welcome any of your feedback, whether it's comments, questions, etc. In fact, I got some feedback this week, and that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on in this episode, is answering some of those questions that came in, as well as there were a couple items that I actually forgot to put in there the first week, so we'll touch on that as well. I want to dive right in, but first, let me take care of a couple house cleaning items. First, our email has changed. I know it's only the second week, but I wanted to get the right email address that we can have moving forward, and so it has changed. The new one is centerlaneconversations@gmail.com. Again, centerlaneconversations@gmail.com. If you were kind enough to take the time to email me last week, I didn't get it, and I'm so sorry about that. So if you wouldn't mind, if you still have that pressing question, if you have some comments you'd like to make, if you wouldn't mind emailing me again at our new address, at our new email address, I'll be sure to respond. In fact, I did get some feedback this week. Some folks reached out to me, found me on the web, and did ask me some questions. And that's what this show is going to be about, is the follow-up, the answers to those questions. And then there was a couple items actually that I had forgotten to put in there last week that I would like to touch on that coincide with all of this as well. So additionally, if you do need to get a hold of us outside of email, you can find us out on Facebook and at Instagram at Center Lane Conversations. And then we do have a Twitter handle at Center Lane Convo. So it's Center Lane and CONVO. So again, welcome the dialogue, whether you're from the left side of the political spectrum or from the right side of the political spectrum, or you're like me, right in the middle, where in some cases you'll be right of center, others you'll be left of center. I welcome it. I want to have good government. I want to have respectful dialogue. That's how we grow. That's how ultimately we have a better society. And we need to bounce ideas around in a respectful way. We need to hear each other's backgrounds, their points of view, so that we can learn from one another. Okay, one of the viewers reached out to me and actually was wondering about this sword behind me, wanted me to mention it on one of my next episodes. So let me just touch on it real quick. That is a Marine Corps NCO Sword. So I mentioned I was an active duty Marine in the mid-90s. I became a non-commissioned officer, and when you get to that level, as part of your dress uniform, you are allowed to wear an NCO Sword. So I have that obviously on my wall since then. Hope you enjoy it. Kind of a cool piece. And so that's that. Okay, let's jump right in. But before I get to the follow-up questions that came into me this week, let me touch on one thing that I forgot to put in the initial episode last weekend. It had to do with the state's ability to restrict your constitutional rights at the federal level. Now, for example, let's take the Second Amendment. It's a hot button issue, I know, but the right to bear arms. It is in the United States Constitution, Second Amendment. But you may not know that depending on the state you live in, your actual rights can be really encroached upon. So here's how it works. I mentioned last week that the state cannot violate the federal level. The state cannot violate the U.S. Constitution. If there is a conflict, the U.S. Constitution wins. However, I also mentioned that under the 10th Amendment, anything not explicitly mentioned or stated in the U.S. Constitution, those powers go to the state level. The founders wanted a smaller federal government and give power to the people. So the state level gets most of the power, but again, cannot violate the U.S. Constitution. What does that mean for us? So let's go back to the Second Amendment. We have the right to bear arms. However, depending upon the state you live in, the ease of which you can purchase a firearm, get ammunition, what sorts of firearms, etc., all of that can be different based upon the state you live in. Some states are very wide open. They have open carry. They're very, I'll say, gun friendly, if you will, as far as the rights to carry. Others are very constrictive, and really they only have to have one option out there for you, and they can say that, hey, yes, you have the right to bear arms. If we want to limit you to the type of guns, the type of ammo, etc., then we can certainly do that. It doesn't prevent you technically from bearing arms of some sort or purchasing it, but we are absolutely going to lock you down. We're going to put stricter gun laws in place. We're going to put background checks, etc. And so you will see again the differences depending upon the state you live in. I hope you're beginning to see that this dialogue about local state rights and how they may have the power to infringe upon your rights you get to enjoy under the U.S. Constitution, not violating them, but certainly butting up against them and making these freedoms very, very difficult to walk out in some cases. I hope you're beginning to understand and appreciate that this becomes a launching point for the dialogue at the federal level. At the federal level, there's a lot of talk about whether someone wants big government or small government at the federal level, etc. And we'll get into that in future weeks. It's one of my most passionate things to talk about. I love it, but it is broad and it is deep at the same time. There's a lot of aspects to it. So again, looking forward to that conversation at some point. But I wanted to make sure I at least touched on the state's ability to perhaps infringe upon your rights a little bit before we jump in to the next episode. But now let's go ahead and get to some of these follow-up questions that I got. So I hope you don't mind. As viewers sent in their questions, I did go ahead and print them out so I could ask them properly. I don't want to misquote them by any means. So here we go. The first is from John in Tustin. Thank you so much. This is Tustin, California. Thank you for reaching out to me. His question is this: in regards to those powers given to the state during an emergency pandemic, is there a time limit to this power to do whatever? And secondly, does this mean during this time the Constitution is null and void, temporarily or indefinitely? Now let me touch on his second point, his second question regarding whether our constitutional rights are considered null and void temporarily or indefinitely. So last week, if you recall, if you did get a chance to watch that, I did mention that we all get to enjoy the specific freedoms laid out in the U.S. Constitution. The only time that those are superseded, they become null and void, is when there is considered an imminent threat to the health and safety of the public. So during the pandemic, that was issued. It became the power to the states became essentially police power, and we were able to go, or forced to go into lockdown. So as far as that goes, it is temporary. The minute the emergency status is taken care of, as soon as it ends, your rights are free and clear. We're walking around as free people as we should. Now the second part, again, in regards to those powers given to the state during an emergency pandemic, is there a time limit to this power to do whatever? Now this is one that's even more interesting to me. The answer is, it depends on the state you live in. For example, the state of Wisconsin, I thought was really, really interesting. In their constitution, it gives the executive power free reign to do what he or she wants pretty much over the first 30 days. It's structured very much like the U.S. Constitution. So let me give you an example. As President of the United States, he or she, when we have a female president, will be the commander-in-chief of the military. So I'll just mention he for now to make it easier. We haven't had a female president yet, so I'll just go with the he to keep it quicker. So if there is a hot spot in the world, something where we need to respond with military action, he is given that freedom because the Congress is the one that actually controls the military budget, and they're the ones that actually declare war. But in times of, when time is of the essence, they don't want to get into a bunch of bureaucracy and decision-making and debate, etc. They just want to give the freedom to the president as commander-in-chief of the military to go do what he needs to do, to strike where it's needed, to take care of business, and he can really do what he needs to for the first 30 days. Technically, after the first 30 days, Congress can put a stop to him. And again, the reason is because they want him to come back in. There's an accountability aspect, the balance of powers, if you will. And they pretty much say, you know what, it's been a month, it's been 30 days of doing what you felt was needed. but now there needs to be an accountability. Now there needs to be some discussion. If you want to continue to deploy troops, etc., that's going to cost money. We're the ones with the power of the purse. We're the ones that control the budget. So we'll say, yes, you can go ahead with your military action and we'll fund it, or no, it's not going to be approved. You need to stop that immediately. And then also, as I mentioned, the Congress are the ones that technically declare war. So if we were to have military action against another country, for example, and it really got hot and started expanding, and the potential of the declaration of war was needed, then that is something they want to rein in from the president. So there's some accountability there. So I say that because Wisconsin is sort of structured in the same way. The governor could lock down the state for 30 days. He had that right within the Constitution. But what was interesting a couple weeks ago is that he tried to extend it. He told the state, we're going to continue the lockdown. Everyone was up in arms. Everyone was mad. And the Supreme Court at the state level actually jumped in and said, you know what? The governor, the executive of the state, has overstepped his rights. And they deemed that edict for a lockdown is unconstitutional. At that point, they immediately opened the floodgates. They reopened the economy. They reopened the restaurants, the bars, you name it, and everyone went out and let loose. So in Wisconsin, that's how that was structured. In California, it's different, and I'll answer that because you are here in California. So really, there is no time limit. This is a unique time. There have been epidemics, there have been pandemics before, yellow fever, etc. But there is no timetable to this. It is a little bit uncharted waters. And for everything that I can tell, I've looked through a lot of resources. I'm definitely not a lawyer, but I have scoured this thing because I wanted to honor your question. And everything that I see states that Governor Newsom and the executive as governor can determine who gets locked down for how long, and until the emergency actually is considered stopped, it's going to continue. One other point I'll make with regards to the restrictions or lockdowns or quarantines or any executive order that comes out from the governor. One thing that it says, at least in our Constitution, is that you can't pick and choose the edicts. For example, the rights to assemble. That's significant. Churches are opening again. People want to be on the steps in Sacramento, peacefully assembling to kind of come against what they feel is improper policy by the government. And so you can't say, for a church perspective, you can't have more than 50 people, and then say, but if you're going to assemble at the steps of the Capitol, you can't have more than 10, or you can't have more than 100, etc. If you're going to say the right to assemble in whatever capacity that is, you have to put stipulations in writing on what that is, and it has to be uniform across all assemblies. So I hope that helps. John, if there's any other questions you have, please send them my way. I'll do my best to either follow up with this if I didn't answer it well, or answer your next question. Now the next question comes from Amy. She is in Aliso Viejo, California, also in Southern California. So thank you, Californians, for reaching out to me. I do appreciate it. Her question is this: Jeff, during any of your research, have you found any type of loophole regarding the state of emergency and how our rights can be overridden when that's declared? Well, I did a lot of research this week, and I thought I may have found a loophole, but Amy, I didn't. It's pretty tight. I've looked through a lot of things. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I read through a lot of folks who are professors in law, etc., and the loopholes that I can see aren't there. The closest thing I could find is in the government code. So you have the U.S. Constitution and you have the California Government Code. Within this, it lays out the California Emergency Services Act, which essentially lays out what the governor can and can't do, more so what he can or she can do during an emergency. And it goes through, you can see it here, a bunch of things. Now, there is one thing here that talks about regulations cannot remain in effect for more than 60 days. However, the regulation that is dealing with is non-safety related restrictions. So let me back up. So an executive order can state, hey, we're going to lock you down. He can pretty much control anything that he needs to do from a city, county, any local level, any government institution, etc. He can control what's needed in the time of an emergency. And that executive order stands for a certain amount of time. I had thought that this stated initially that that executive order I thought it said it lasts either till the emergency is gone or for up to 60 days, whichever is sooner. However, I'm sorry to say, again, this deals with non-safety related restrictions. So, COVID-19, it's still considered a safety issue, from a health safety issue, and so that's why I think these executive orders still stand, and from what I see, I don't see any loopholes. All this to say, though, again, make your voice known. I think this state in particular is starting to open up more quickly, and I think it's because the people have voiced their concerns, are getting a little angry. People, certainly the unemployment issue, everything that's gone on that we're all suffering through, regardless of where we're at in the country. But it's being noticed, and the dialogue is getting pretty heated. And the governor, I think, is relaxing some of those restrictions specifically because of that. So we are speeding up, and hopefully we'll be back to full speed here fairly soon, but it should be interesting to see how all this plays out. Okay, I wanted to leave you with one final thought. I had mentioned I started this show because I wanted to talk about good government. I wanted balanced conversations. I wanted to look at things from the left side, from the right side, from the middle side, from a side that maybe not even we here in the United States deploy, if you will. I wanted thought. I wanted discussion. That's what drives me. I think that's how we become a better society of gathering information from around us, trying to glean from everything, bring the best of whatever we see into a solution and move the society forward. So as much as I would normally not want to keep talking about the COVID-19 subject because it seems to be what everyone is talking about, and honestly some of us just need a diversion once in a while, I did promise to be up on current events, to talk about the issues that you're interested in talking about, and even based upon the questions I got this week, it is still at the forefront of people's mind. But here's the thought. Here's the thing I wanted to mention. This past week, an article came out that I was sifting through and talked about what was going on with the lockdown, or lack thereof, in Sweden. I don't know if you've heard about this, but Sweden did things differently than any of the European Union. In fact, definitely different than we did here in the United States. They did not lock down their economy at all. They just said, you know what, we're gonna go for it. We're gonna keep everything open. We're in it for the long game. They said, we believe that this COVID-19, that there's going to be a second wave that's going to create problems. And in order to push beyond that, we're gonna kind of take it on the chin a little bit this first time around. We're gonna keep everything open, and we're going to do what is called herd immunity, which means when a society, when the populace, about 70 to 90% of the population builds up the antibodies to fight a disease, they're then immune to it moving forward. So what Sweden did is they said, we want our population to go out, start building up the antibodies that are needed so that if anything comes around later on in the year or moving forward, that our population will be good. We do realize there's going to be a little bit of a hit initially, but it beats having to shut down our economy, put everyone in lockdown, and all of that entails. And so they did it differently. They moved forward with that structure. And I was looking at this report dated May 25th from Johns Hopkins University, and it talked about the deaths per 100,000 inhabitants. It talked about the kind of the worst 10, if you will. The United States made the top 10. We were number 9 with about 30 deaths per 100,000 people of population. Belgium was the worst, then Spain, the UK, Italy, France. Sweden was 6th. They are 6th. They have a higher death rate than the United States, but not tremendously high. Again, we are at 30 deaths per 100,000. Sweden is about 40. So they're about a third higher than we are. Belgium, by the way, is up at 81.53. They're way up there. But so Sweden, they have about a third more deaths. The death rate is about a third higher than ours, but it will be interesting to see what happens in the coming months is to see how immune they are moving forward, how their economy does versus the rest of the world, etc. So again, not taking sides. I've not done enough research into that, and I think it's probably too early to even make a determination yet. But it is interesting to see how these other ways of doing government and laying out public policy, how the diversity is out there, and it's interesting to see. Let's see what works, what doesn't, etc. So once again, I hope this was entertaining, helpful, etc. Please email me if you have any questions. Find me on social media. I am Jeff Frankenfield. Thank you for joining Center Lane Conversations, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.